Chapter 11. This time, I'm choosing to stay alive. I don't know if you've ever had a moment where you're sitting in the middle of your own life looking around and you realize, I've survived everything I wasn't supposed to. And yet, survival doesn't always feel like living. The last chapter ended with me standing in the wreckage of all I thought I'd lost, promising myself I wouldn't let it define me. But I didn't tell you what came next, because the truth is, after the applause in my own head faded, I went home to a bed that felt too big, a ceiling that wouldn't stop staring back, and a mind that wouldn't stop replaying every moment I'd failed myself. That's when it hit me. I'd gotten good at not dying, but I hadn't learned how to want to live. See, nobody talks about that in recovery circles. They talk about sobriety milestones, step work, but there's this silent, unspoken part of healing. What do you do after the crisis is over, when you're left alone with a life you don't even recognize? I knew how to survive the storm. But when the water was finally still, I didn't know where to sail. And that's when the nights got dangerous. Not because I wanted to end my life. No, it was something quieter than that. Something more invisible. It was the slow erosion of will. It was the days blending into nights. The mornings where getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain barefoot. The moments where I thought, if I just disappeared into the background, would anyone really notice? There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It just hums, low, steady, almost like a background noise you stop noticing. Until one day, it's the only thing you can hear. That's what those weeks felt like. I kept up the act, smiled in public, nodded when people talked, pretended to be inspired when I was really just numb. But inside, I was counting the exits in every room, not because I wanted to run, but because I needed to know where the escape was, if it all became too much. One night, I sat in the dark, knees pulled to my chest, no music, no TV, just me and a hum in my head, and I asked myself, would I even care if I was gone? The answer terrified me, not because it was yes, but because it was, I don't know. That's when something shifted, not into hope. Hope was still far away, but into honesty. I admitted it, out loud. I don't know if I want to be here. It wasn't a cry for help. There was no audience, just me, whispering into the dark, finally telling the truth to the only person who needed to hear it. And here's the strange thing. Once I said it, I felt something loosen inside me. Because here's what I've learned. Change doesn't always start with inspiration. Sometimes it starts with defeat, with finally falling to your knees and saying, I can't keep living like this. That night, I didn't make a grand plan. I didn't vow to heal. I just gave myself permission to consider another option. One word. Maybe. Maybe I could make it through this. Maybe I could tell someone. Maybe I could try. It wasn't much. But it was mine, and it was enough to get me to the next morning. What I didn't know yet was that maybe would become the thin, fragile thread that held me together, and that the next chapter of my life would test that thread more than anything before. The next morning wasn't magical. There was no sunrise that felt like a personal sign from the universe, no soundtrack-worthy moment where the clouds parted. The truth is, I woke up heavy. My chest still ached. My thoughts still circled the same drain. But there was one small difference. I noticed my own breathing. It sounds ridiculous, But in that moment, I realized I'd been holding my breath for months without knowing it. That morning, I let it out. Slow. I listened to the sound. I felt my lungs fill again, and for a second I thought, I'm still here. I didn't tell anyone about the night before, not because I was hiding, but because I didn't want my maybe to get crushed under someone else's advice or fear. Sometimes people mean well, but they try to fix you when you're not ready to be fixed. I didn't need fixing. I needed space to want to stay. So I started doing something strange. Every morning, before I looked at my phone or let the day rush at me, I'd ask, do I want to be here today? Some days the answer was yes. Some days it was no. Most days it was still, I don't know. But asking the question made me feel like I had a say in it, and that was new. It was around this time that I started noticing the people around me differently. In the clinic, in the recovery rooms, on the street. The guy with the distant stare, the woman whose laugh sounded too forced, the kid pretending to scroll his phone so no one would talk to him. I recognized them not because I knew their names, but because I knew their silence. I could see my own, I don't know if I want to be here, in their eyes, and it shook me. One day, after group, I lingered by the door. People were leaving, chatting, laughing, and then I saw him, a guy I'd never spoken to, sitting alone, staring at the floor like it had answers. Without thinking, I walked over, sat down. No deep speech, no cliché pep talk. I just said, "It's been a long week, huh?" He didn't look up, but I saw his shoulders shift just slightly, and then quietly he said, "Yeah." That was it. That was our whole conversation. But as I walked away, something clicked in my head. I realized that the thing I was trying to find for myself, the reason to stay alive, might actually be hiding in the way I showed up for other people. It wasn't about being their hero. I didn't have the energy for that. It was about presence, just being there, even for a moment. Because maybe that's what I had needed all along, not someone to fix me, but someone to notice me. And if I could be that for someone else, even once, maybe that was enough to keep me breathing one more day. I didn't know it yet, but that tiny exchange by the door was going to set off a chain of moments that would force me to choose every single day whether I was just surviving or finally, truly living. That night, I lay in bed thinking about him, the man by the door, the way his shoulders lifted when I said those 4 simple words. I kept replaying it, not because I thought I had changed his life, but because I knew how much that moment would have meant to me if the roles were reversed. It made me think back to all the times I'd been inches away from disappearing when I wished someone would just notice, not fix me, not push me, just notice. And I realized something that nearly knocked the wind out of me. If I had given up back then, I wouldn't be here to give that moment to him. The next few days were messy. Some mornings I felt like I was winning. Other mornings it felt like I was right back where I started. But here's the thing about deciding to stay alive. It's not a one-time choice. It's not something you do once and then ride the high forever. It's a decision you make over and over, sometimes every hour. And each time you choose it, it changes you. I started noticing the world again in small, unexpected ways. The way the sunlight hit the cracks in the sidewalk. The way the smell of coffee made me feel like maybe I belonged somewhere. The way music could make my chest ache and heal me at the same time. I wasn't happy yet, but I was present, and that was new. One evening, while leaving the clinic, I passed a mirror in the hallway. For a split second, I didn't recognize the person staring back at me, not because I looked better, not because I looked healed, but because, for the first time in years, I saw softness, not weakness, softness, the kind that says, I'm still here and I'm willing to see what happens next. It scared me because with softness comes vulnerability, and vulnerability meant I could be hurt again. But then I thought, I've already been hurt before, and I survived. So what if this time I let myself live, even if it means risking the pain? The next morning, I woke up to rain tapping the window. Normally, I would have pulled the covers over my head and tried to sleep through it. Instead, I opened the blinds, watched the drops race each other down the glass, and without planning to, I whispered, I want to see where this goes. It wasn't a grand declaration. It wasn't a vow I wrote in a journal. But it was mine. A quiet promise to keep showing up for myself the same way I had shown up for that stranger by the door. I didn't know it then, but holding on to that small promise would lead me straight into the hardest test of my recovery yet, one that would force me to decide if staying alive was enough, or if I was finally ready to start living.